What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we're going to be breaking down all of the main card fights from this weekend's UFC Fight Night, Jamahal Hill versus Johnny Walker from a betting perspective. Hopefully you'll be able to use the information in this video to make better betting decisions and maybe even earn some extra cash this weekend. And if you'd like to watch breakdown videos for all the other fights on this card, all of those prelim matchups, head on over to my website mmabettingtips.com. You can see it in the background here, and I'll leave a link to it in the description below. On there you'll find breakdown videos for every single fight on this card, including the prelims, and you'll also find the VIP chat room on there which you can use to communicate with myself and other members in the community. I'm on there about 8 to 12 hours a day. You'll also find a wide range of bets for every single UFC event on the website. Pretty much all of them are profitable, so check it out. I think you are going to love it. But remember, nothing in this video is financial advice, and you must remember to gamble responsibly. I strongly recommend that you do all your own research before pulling the trigger on any of these fights or placing any bets. Very, very important to gamble responsibly. With that being said, have put a lot of time into researching the matchups that we're going to talk about today, and I do make a living from betting on MMA as well. Been doing this a very long time, so the information that I'm going to share with you in this video is coming from a pretty good place, and do consider myself to be pretty knowledgeable on this kind of stuff. So with that being said, let's jump into the first fight that I would like to talk about in today's video, which is going to be the main event between Jamahal Hill and Johnny Walker. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Jamahal Hill is an absolutely massive favourite at odds of about 1.40, which is minus 250 for an implied probability of 71%. And if we take a look at the odds on Johnny Walker, he is currently around an average of 3.10, which is going to be plus 210 for an implied probability of 32%. Now, when I first saw the odds on this fight, I couldn't believe my eyes. I was very, very surprised that Jamahal Hill is this big of a favourite, because it wasn't that long ago that people were kind of writing Jamahal Hill off after his loss to Paul Craig as being, nothing special. And it wasn't that long ago that people were talking about Johnny Walker as potentially being someone that could beat John Jones, right? There was a lot of hype on him when he first came into the UFC, and he was just running through everyone, getting these, big knockout wins in just a space of a couple of minutes. But a lot has changed. Now Jamahal Hill is a big favourite over Johnny Walker, and that is quite surprising to me, because Johnny Walker is quite a big name. I feel like Jamahal Hill has flown under the radar a little bit, and I've been really high on Jamahal Hill for a long time. I think he's excellent. I think he's one of the best light heavyweights in the world. I think he's capable of being a top 5 fighter. And when we look at some of the guys in the title picture at the moment, guys like Glover Teixeira, Jiri Prohaska, you look at Jan Blachowicz has just lost the belt. I think Jamahal Hill would stand a really good chance of beating all 3 of those guys. So I was a little bit disappointed that he was a big favourite in this matchup, because I think he does well against Johnny Walker, and I was hoping that he would still kind of be flying under the radar a little bit with, people not realising how good he is. I was kind of hoping that Johnny Walker's name and exciting fighting style would weigh on the odds a little bit, like we quite often see. But that's not the case, and it looks like people have finally realised how good Jamahal Hill is. I know that Jiri Prohaska is one of those really big hype guys in the light heavyweight division at the moment, but if I were you, Jamahal Hill is the dude that I would be keeping my eye on, because he's very special. He's a lot more technical than Jiri. Jiri's kind of wild and reckless, doesn't have an efficient fighting style. Hill's pretty legit, man, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he performs this weekend. So in terms of the tail of the tape, Jamahal Hill, 30 years old, 6'4", with a 79-inch reach, and Johnny Walker is 29 years old, 6'6", with an 82-inch reach. So Johnny Walker will have a bit of a size and reach advantage over Jamahal Hill, and he's absolutely huge for a light heavyweight. This wingspan makes him one of the biggest fighters in the UFC, or one of the biggest fighters by wingspan. I think Alexander Volkov is pretty much equal to that wingspan. I think that Volkov might be an inch taller, but Walker's got 1 inch longer reach. Either way, Walker is one of the biggest guys in the UFC. And so I don't actually think he's going to be fighting at light heavyweight for much longer. I think eventually he's going to move up to heavyweight, which I think would be a great move for him, because he's going to be a lot faster than these guys at heavyweight. His gas tank issues won't be as big of a problem at heavyweight because lots of guys at heavyweight slow down as fights progress as well. And I think with Johnny Walker's wingspan, there's no need for him to really fight at light heavyweight. The talent pool is quite a bit lighter at heavyweight as well. So I'd like to see Johnny Walker move up sooner rather than later, but let me know how you feel about that. Also, let me know if you think Jamahal Hill's as good as Jiri. Let me know. I think he's better. Let me know in the comments below what you think. But how do these two guys match up from a stylistic point of view? Well, if we talk about how they match up in terms of grappling first, that's probably going to be the easiest thing to cover, because the weakness of both these fighters is definitely on the ground. Neither of them have particularly good takedown defense, and they're both quite low level on the ground. The difference is that Jamahal Hill, because he's got a great gas tank and he's full of energy, Hill is very good at scrambling back up to his feet when he gets taken down, whereas Johnny Walker tends to get worn down quite quickly if he's forced to grapple, so he is a bit easier to hold down than Hill. Not necessarily due to technique, but because of the fact that he slows down a lot. But I don't see this fight going to the ground. I really see this being a stand-up fight and staying standing, because with Jamahal Hill, he's a pure striker, never tries to take his opponents down. He's more than happy to stand and strike with everyone that he faces. So it's unlikely that Jamahal Hill is going to be able to look to take Johnny Walker down. I also feel it's unlikely that Johnny Walker will try to take Jamahal Hill down, because the one time that we saw Johnny Walker use a grappling heavy game plan was in his matchup against Nikita Krylov, and he came out very aggressive, trying to drag Krylov to the ground and win the fight on the ground. But because he's a big dude, 6'6" with an 82-inch reach, he's absolutely massive. And big guys like that, as a general rule, just don't have the gas tank to fight at a high pace for very long, because they're big, they're muscular. That big frame, that big body, all that weight takes a lot of energy to work hard and exert energy, and very difficult for a guy like Walker to grapple hard. There's not many 6'6" tall, 82-inch reach strong wrestlers in the history of the UFC for a reason. So I think Johnny Walker learned his lesson after that matchup and kind of realised that he doesn't have the gas tank to grapple hard for 3 rounds. And so I don't see him trying to take Jamahal Hill down, because Hill is difficult to take down. He is difficult to hold down because of how scrambly he is. And so if Johnny Walker did try to take Hill down in this fight, he's probably not going to achieve much other than tiring himself out, because if he does take Hill down, he's probably going to find it difficult to hold Hill down, and he's just going to burn through a lot of energy that is going to make it very difficult for him to be competitive in a 25-minute matchup, because obviously if he gets tired after a round or two, he's got to deal with Hill, who's got a great gas tank for the rest of the fight. What is interesting about Johnny Walker, though, is that I feel he is on a journey of self-discovery at the moment, and he is evolving and trying to find out a fighting style, or trying to figure out a fighting style that works well for him. And I say this because we've seen very different sides of him in his UFC career. We saw him come into the UFC back in 2018, and he would just go out there, throw a load of flying shit, throw a lot of spinning shit, and try to kill his opponent in round 1. And, was pretty successful at doing that in his first 3 fights. He then came out and tried to do that against Corey Anderson, but of course when you're as wild and reckless as Walker is, and when you're putting yourself in a position to knock your opponent out, you're also putting yourself in a position to be knocked out. And Johnny Walker's fighting style when he came into the UFC was so wild and reckless, it was only a matter of time before he was going to get caught and countered and knocked out himself. And that's exactly what happened in the Corey Anderson fight. From there, you could see a definite shift in Johnny Walker's style and approach to fighting, where against Nikita Krylov, instead of coming out with that kamikaze style that we saw from him in his first 4 fights in the UFC, like I said earlier, he came in with a grappling heavy game plan against Nikita Krylov, possibly thinking that the style that I have been fighting with in the UFC so far is unsustainable. If I keep coming out at the gate 1,000 miles an hour, sprinting, throwing flying shit and spinning shit and trying to kill my opponent in a minute, sometimes I may succeed in doing that, but other times I'm the one that's going to get brutally knocked out and concussed, and then face a long, grueling road back and I'm to rehabilitate myself from, pretty serious head trauma. And I think after the Corey Anderson fight, Johnny Walker realised that he didn't want to play that game and it was time for him to fight a lot smarter, a lot safer, and a lot more strategically. And he tried to do that against Nikita Krylov. There was none of the usual wild, crazy, spinning, flying shit that we usually see from him. Against Krylov, he came in with a grappling heavy game plan. Unfortunately for him, he gassed out. But it definitely showed that Walker, after his loss to Corey Anderson, was trying to experiment with different styles to figure out a style of fighting that worked well for him and his skill set and his body type. The Ryan Spann fight was then absolutely crazy, like a typical Johnny Walker fight, but I think that was mainly down to the fact that Ryan Spann was also initiating crazy exchanges and kind of dragging Walker into one of those mental fights where both guys could get KO'd at any second. And to be fair, Johnny Walker was in a lot of trouble in this fight. He was dropped by Spann and almost finished. But then in his most recent fight against Thiago Santos, we saw a completely new version of Johnny Walker again, where there was no spinning shit, there was no flying shit, and there was no takedown attempts. So this was a completely new version of Johnny Walker that we'd never seen before. It was nothing like his first 4 fights in the UFC, nothing like the Krylov performance. This Walker was a completely new version, out of training under John Kavanagh at SBG Ireland. But unfortunately, this new version of Walker didn't really do anything. He didn't really achieve a lot. He basically fought at a really slow pace, a really low volume, tentative performance where he really didn't throw anything and really didn't land anything in 25 minutes. Walker looked pretty good defensively and his gas tank looked great, but he held back so much that he just didn't score points. And I'm not exaggerating when I say in 25 minutes I don't think he landed a clean hard punch on Santos. So Walker went from one extreme to the other, where in his first sort of 5 fights leading up to the Krylov fight, he would come out the gate very aggressively, very hard, and burn himself out or get a quick win. When he fought Santos, he went to the other extreme end of the scale where he barely did anything for 25 minutes. But what was really positive about that performance is that Walker will now know what it feels like to go 5 rounds. He'll know what it feels like to pace himself over 25 minutes. And in fairness to Walker, his gas tank looked great. Obviously, it was because the fight was contested at a really slow pace and he didn't really exert much energy. But he's still a big dude who was able to hang in there against one of the best light heavyweights in the world in Thiago Santos and not really take much damage, not get tired at all. In round 5, he looked fresh as a daisy. Walker looked great. He was still moving well. Hand speed was good. Wasn't breathing heavily. So that's interesting because we've seen 3 very different styles of Johnny Walker in the past. We've seen the wild, reckless, aggressive version, tries to kill everyone in a minute. We've seen the grappling heavy game plan from Johnny Walker as well against Krylov, and now we've seen the super passive, super tentative, point fighting style of Johnny Walker that we got against Thiago Santos. And this shows that he's experimenting with different styles and again trying to find a style of fighting that works for him, his body type and his skill set. And this actually reminds me of a process that we saw Francis Ngannou go through when he first came into the UFC. If we take a look at Francis Ngannou's record, you'll see that there are a lot of similarities between Francis and Johnny Walker. Now, I'm not saying that Francis Ngannou, I'm not saying that Johnny Walker is going to develop into being anywhere near as good as Francis Ngannou, but they have gone through the same kind of process in their time in the UFC. When Francis Ngannou first came into the UFC, he would just come out the gate super aggressively and just try to kill everyone in the first round. A few guys like Luis Enrique and Curtis Blades made it into round 2, but for the most part we all remember that Ngannou would just come out the gate, blitz his opponent early, knock him out, and he would look absolutely terrifying. He then ran into Stipe Miocic, which I feel was kind of the Johnny Walker, Nikita Krylov type fight, where Francis Ngannou went into that first fight against Stipe with a style that worked very well for him. he would just come out the gate, very aggressive, redlining it, sprinting, exactly like Johnny Walker, kill everyone in round 1 and live happily ever after. Collect his 50G bonus check, his win bonus, sail off into the sunset. And he tried to do that against Stipe in the first fight. If you go and watch that first fight, he was very aggressive in the first round, but ended up burning himself out because Stipe weathered the storm in round 1, dragged him into the second and third, and was able to outwork him, out-hustle him, break Ngannou down, and beat him in a really dominant performance. Pretty much, I'm not saying the Nikita Krylov performance was dominant, but similar sort of thing happened. Walker burnt himself out, and Krylov was able to grind him out. So both guys went through that one fight where they realized, oh shit, I'm a big guy. I probably can't sprint non-stop for 25 minutes without getting really tired. And then what did we see immediately after the Stipe Miocic fight? We saw him fight Derek Lewis in a fight where basically nothing happened. Very, very similar to Johnny Walker's fight against Thiago Santos. Francis Ngannou basically, put in a very tentative, passive, low-volume performance, just like Johnny Walker did against Santos, where neither guy really did a lot, and Derek Lewis just about edged the decision. But what's interesting about that fight and the Johnny Walker versus Thiago Santos fight is that they're virtually identical. You've got these two guys, big, scary knockout artists, who have run through everyone, then fought someone that was able to weather the early storm, drag him into deep water and beat him. And then shortly after that happened, in their next performance, we see them fight way more tentatively, way more passively, and pace themselves. And even though it resulted in them losing, they did gain valuable knowledge and valuable experience in terms of how to pace themselves over a longer period of time. And again, just like with Johnny Walker against Thiago Santos, Francis Ngannou didn't slow down at all against Derek Lewis. His gas tank looked fantastic. Skiddy didn't do anything, but he still got the confidence under his belt that I can go 3 rounds without being a gassed out mess that can't defend himself. And look at the confidence that Francis took from that. Since then, again, he's absolutely running through everyone, and his gas tank looked absolutely phenomenal against Cyril Gane, even with him fighting with a blown ACL. So why am I talking a lot about Francis Ngannou in this video? What is the relevance of this? Well, the relevance of this is that it shows that fighters like Johnny Walker, like Francis Ngannou, when they start to experiment with different styles, it shows that they're evolving and they're trying to find a style that works for them. They're trying to learn. In order to become the best at anything in life, you've got to be very good at learning from your mistakes. Becoming an expert at anything is a journey of constantly self-improving, and the way you can do that, like I say, learning from your mistakes. The amount of mistakes I've made over the years when it comes to gambling, you wouldn't believe. I've been doing this, been betting on sports for 20 years. It's been a long journey to get to where I am now, where I can earn a living from this. It's not easy. And you see the same with Johnny Walker, the same with Francis Ngannou. The reason why we're seeing different styles from Walker is because he's trying to figure out a style that works best for him. And so this is significant because we don't really know what to expect from Walker. We've seen him come out the gate very aggressively, try and kill everyone in round 1. We've seen him with a grappling heavy game plan, and we've seen him ultra passive, ultra tentative against Santos, and none of those 3 styles worked, right? He gassed out and got grinded out against Krylov, lost decision against Santos, ultimately was knocked out for being reckless against Corey Anderson. To be fair, got dropped by Ryan Spann as well. So I would expect the version of Johnny Walker we get this weekend to look completely different to any version that we've seen from him before, as he tries to come in with a new style that may finally be the magic bullet and finally be the style that is going to help him make the most of his skill set and have a bright career in the UFC. Now, we don't know what that style is going to look like, but if I had to bet, I would imagine it would be somewhere in the middle of all 3 styles we've seen so far. So if you imagine a triangle, you've got super aggressive, kill everybody in 1 minute Walker up here, grappling heavy game plan Walker here, and you've got super passive, does nothing for 25 minutes Walker here. I imagine the style that Jamahal Hill's going to experience this weekend, right in the middle, combination of all 3, where we'll see him not quite as aggressive as he was in his early fights, but not as passive as he was in the Thiago Santos fight, and he might throw in the odd takedown. I don't think he'll commit very hard to it, and I don't think he'll try and grapple that much, but he might just throw it in there just to mix things up and throw Jamahal Hill off a little bit. So I would expect a combination of those three styles. It's a complete wild guess, but what I do want to let you guys know is that I wouldn't be expecting a version of Johnny Walker this weekend that we've ever seen before. I think we're going to get a brand new version of this guy. So we've talked a lot about the uncertainty around what to expect from Johnny Walker and how he's still kind of trying to figure things out. Whereas Jamahal Hill is the complete opposite. We know exactly what to expect from this guy, and I love fighters like Jamahal Hill. What's very interesting about Jamahal Hill is that he has all the attributes required to be a world champion. He has the heart of a lion. He's tough as nails. He has an amazing gas tank, a good chin. He's reasonably good everywhere. And in his mind, he believes that he cannot be beat. Whenever you see him in interviews, he's ridiculously confident. And he's got that championship mentality. He's got that chip on his shoulder where he doesn't think that anyone in the division has anything for him. And like GSP once said, fighting is 90% mental. And Jamahal Hill's mental game, you can tell, is very, very strong. What's interesting about Jamahal Hill is that he's only had 10 pro fights, which is less than half the number of Johnny Walker. But Jamahal Hill is a much more mature fighter. He looks much more experienced. He knows exactly who he is, exactly what he is, and what he wants to achieve. He knows what his limitations are. He fights to his strengths, and he's supremely confident. So it's interesting. Walker is a lot further in his career in terms of experience, in terms of how many fights he's had, but nowhere near as experienced as Jamahal Hill in terms of what we see from him in the octagon. So we've already talked about how these guys match up from a grappling point of view. We now need to talk about how they match up from a striking point of view, which is ultimately really important because this is likely to be a stand-up fight. So this is a very difficult fight for Johnny Walker if it stays standing, because Walker has shown that he will slow down a lot as the fight wears on. We know this because he gassed bad against Krylov when the fight was contested at a high pace, and he intentionally held back against Thiago Santos in order to pace himself. So we know if Jamahal Hill makes Walker work hard, Walker's not going to be able to keep up with him. Jamahal Hill is one of these guys that just fights at a relentless pace. He's got an amazing gas tank. He throws such a high volume of strikes that Walker's not going to be able to keep up with that. Jamahal Hill likes to take control of the centre of the octagon, put his opponent on the back foot, and pressure them into fighting in an uncomfortable range. But what I really like about Jamahal Hill is that he does it in a safe and smart way. A lot of pressure fighters will pressure their opponents while also coming forward and kind of, eating punches with their face to just crowd and smother their opponents in pressure. Jamahal Hill does it in a way smarter way, a way safer way, way more technical way, where he has such a good ability to read his opponents that he comes forward and pressures them so that they have to back up and fight on the outside. But he just peppers them with range-finding strikes from a safe distance, be it jabs or leg kicks. And every time they blitz forward to try and alleviate that pressure, he just backs up and doesn't get sucked into any reckless exchanges. But as the fight wears on, Jamahal Hill gets a better and better read on his opponents. And when that happens, he starts to sit down a little bit harder on his shots, starts to close the distance and fight a little bit tighter to his opponents, so they become even more crowded and under pressure, and he can land with more impact. And as the fight wears on, Jamahal Hill gets better. That's what makes this a very difficult fight for Johnny Walker, because as the fight wears on, Hill's going to get better, but Walker's probably going to get worse. Walker's best chance of winning this fight is to land something big and knock Jamahal Hill out early, but the problem is Jamahal Hill doesn't really engage that much early on. He's very smart. He starts slow, takes time to settle into a rhythm and feel his opponents out. So that's one of the reasons why this is a really, really difficult matchup for Johnny Walker. On top of that, volume is a big issue. Jamahal Hill throws a very diverse range of attacks. Everything he does is set up from the jab, and this guy, he's not trying to load up and kill you with one shot. He's very dangerous. He's got knockout power for sure. Jimmy Crute found out the hard way. But Jamahal Hill's the kind of guy that's going to chip away at you and break you down with volume and his superior technique. That's a big issue for Johnny Walker, because he's looking to load up and catch you with one big fucking nuclear missile, some spinning shit, some flying shit, something that's going to send you to the shadow realm. But in between those big explosive attacks, Johnny Walker isn't throwing volume strikes out there. He's not throwing leg kicks. He's not throwing jabs. Not doing anything to score points. In between big explosive attacks, he's looking to catch his breath and recover for the next big explosive attack. Johnny Walker relies on putting his opponents into a defensive shell so that he can have time to recover in between each explosive attack, and that's why you saw very little output from him against Thiago Santos. He would attack Santos and then spend 30-40 seconds doing nothing so he could catch his breath again to go and do another attack. Jamahal Hill doesn't play that game. When Johnny Walker attacks Jamahal Hill's going to look to block what he does, slip it, move back, circle away, whatever. And then as soon as Johnny Walker stops throwing, Jamahal Hill's going to get right back on top of him and continue to attack him. It's a huge problem for Johnny Walker because there's going to be no time and space to avoid engaging with Hill in this matchup, which is a nightmare for him. He's not going to be able to pace himself. So if we summarise everything we've said here and consider this matchup from a betting perspective, it's a very good fight for Jamahal Hill and a very bad matchup for Johnny Walker. Unfortunately, the odds reflect that. 1.40 minus 250 on Jamahal Hill carries an implied probability of 71%, and that's a very steep price to pay. Personally, I don't like betting on heavy favourites like Jamahal Hill when they're facing someone who's extremely dangerous, and no matter how big Jamahal Hill's technical advantages are in this matchup, it only takes one crazy flying knee or one crazy spinning back fist from Johnny Walker to end his night. So because of that, it's very difficult for me to bet Jamahal Hill at these odds, even though I think he wins a very high percentage of the time. On the flip side, I'm not interested in betting on Johnny Walker because I do feel the vast majority of the time he gets absolutely outclassed here by Jamahal Hill, and Jamahal Hill takes one massive step towards the title picture because he really is that good and he really should be hanging with the top 5 guys in the division. I know he lost to Paul Craig. It was a bump in the road. Every fighter loses. Trust me, this guy's very special and he's going to have a big future in the UFC's light heavyweight division. I can't wait to see if he beats Johnny Walker, what comes next for him. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. Please let me know in the comments below if you're as high on this guy as I am, and let me know who you think is going to win this weekend. So we now move on to talking about the next fight, the next fight, which is Jamie Pickett versus Kyle Daukaus. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Kyle Daukaus currently the favourite. Average odds of about 1.40, which is minus 250 for an implied probability of 71%. If we take a look at the odds on Jamie Pickett, he's currently around an average of 3.10, which is plus 210 for an implied probability of 32%. So Jamie Pickett is 33 years old, 6'2" with an 80-inch reach. Kyle Daukaus is 28 years old, 6'3" with a 76-inch reach. So bit of a size, bit of a reach advantage for Jamie Pickett. He's got a 4-inch reach advantage over Kyle Daukaus, but nothing too major there. Age, nothing too major either. The only other X factor that I guess we should mention is that Jamie Pickett is taking this fight on short notice, although he did fight a month ago against Joseph Holmes, so perhaps he's still in shape and perhaps it won't be too much of an issue. What I can say is that Jamie Pickett has a pretty good gas tank. He always seems to be in shape. I don't think I've ever even seen this guy breathe in heavy. He's always got the gas tank to push hard for 3 rounds, whereas we have seen Kyle Daukaus slow down in some of his past fights, particularly the Phil Hawes matchup. So even though Pickett is the guy coming on short notice, he's usually in shape. His cardio is really good. I'd be more worried about Daukaus' cardio this weekend. So every once in a while a matchup comes along and I just find it very difficult to get a lean either way and a read on the fight based on the performances we've seen. And this is definitely one of those matchups. I spent a lot of time, spent about 2 hours researching the fight between Kyle Daukaus and Jamie Pickett yesterday. It wasn't fun. And at the end of the session, I just don't have a very strong opinion on how this one plays out. I think it's mainly because both these guys like to spend a lot of time battling for position in the clinch. And whenever you've got 2 guys like that, it is very likely that the matchup will, for the most part, be contested in the clinch. And when that's the case, fights can be kind of difficult to score, or it can be very difficult to work out who's going to have the edge on the night. Because if these two guys do spend the whole fight battling for position in the clinch, ultimately the person that wins is going to be the one who is slightly busier in that clinch position, and it's very difficult on their past performances to work out who that's going to be, because neither is particularly aggressive or active in the clinch. So in terms of striking, both have got very different styles of striking. Daukaus' style of striking actually changes as well as the fight wears on. Early in a matchup, he's very light on his feet, almost in like a sideways karate stance, and he throws a lot of straight karate style punches. And his movement, his accuracy, his striking early in a fight looks very good. But Daukaus is one of these guys that, as the fight wears on and he gets more tired, he becomes very flat-footed, very sloppy, and his striking just isn't effective anymore. So early on, you can expect Daukaus' striking to look pretty good, but around about the 7 or 8 minute mark, not so much. Pickett, on the other hand, is a lot more consistent, but there's not much fluidity to his striking. He's not the best at distance. You know, you're not really going to see Pickett land nice, crisp punches and kicks, you know, in the middle of the octagon at distance. This guy tends to load up on big singular power strikes as he's blitzing forward. So two very different styles of striking here, and two awkward styles as well. It's difficult to gauge how these two match up when it comes to striking, because Pickett likes to fight all the way outside of a range where he can be hit. So Daukaus in that sideways karate stance with the straight karate punches may not trouble Pickett, because Daukaus isn't particularly good at landing at distance either. And when Pickett attacks his opponent on the feet, he tends to load up with big singular power shots. And because he's an uncomfortable striker, he quite often just ends up running into his opponents, and then they start to battle for position in the clinch. The awkwardness of Pickett's striking, where he keeps running into dudes and he's not comfortable fighting at distance, is the reason why big percentages of Pickett's fights do take place in the clinch. So it's a very awkward, ugly fight on the feet. And ultimately what I'm trying to say is, because neither guy really likes to fight at distance, and they're not that comfortable at distance in the middle of the octagon, they probably will just end up running into each other and again fucking about in the clinch a lot. And you know, it's very difficult to predict which guy is going to win the fight in the clinch. In terms of grappling, Jamie Pickett is very difficult to take down. I would anticipate Daukaus to have an advantage on the ground, though. Daukaus is the better offensive wrestler out of the two. He has quite a heavy top game, but weirdly enough, Daukaus is also pretty weak off his back. Jamie Pickett never tries to take his opponents down, though, so even if Daukaus were to get, were to get into top position, even if Daukaus were to end up on the bottom, I mean, it would be unlucky that he'd find himself there anyway, because Pickett rarely tries to take guys down. So if Daukaus were to find himself on his back where he's pretty weak, it would probably be because he's like slipped or lost a scramble or something on the ground. But generally speaking, Pickett tries to avoid going to the ground. What is interesting about Daukaus, though, is but even though he is a better grappler than Jamie Pickett, he does tend to slow down and wear down quite quickly if you make him grapple. So that could be an area where Pickett has success. If these two do start to battle for position in the clinch a lot, and you see, Daukaus start to wear down, that's where Pickett can kind of crank the pace up on him, maybe work for takedowns, maybe get a little bit busier in the clinch, and maybe even disengage and look to force Daukaus to strike. Because what I will also say about Daukaus is, when he starts to get tired, his striking defense goes out the window as well, and he becomes very easy to hit. So this is a messy fight, guys. I don't have a great read on it, because like I say, both guys spend so much time in the clinch, it's very difficult for me to determine who is going to have the advantage there. Like, on one hand, Daukaus is the better grappler and is the better striker than Pickett from a technical point of view, but then it's a weird one, because he does slow down as fights wear on, and when he slows down, he becomes less effective at striking and grappling, which kind of closes the skill gap, and suggests that maybe Pickett can outwork him and out-hustle him with his superior conditioning. It's a tough one for me. Don't have a strong read on this one for you guys. I would recommend doing your own research on this one. Can't really help you with a lean or a pick or anything like that. I don't really know how I feel about that matchup. It's not the case with Alan Baudot versus Parker Porter, though. much easier to get a read on this fight and much easier to kind of predict how these two guys match up from a stylistic point of view. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we've got another 1.40 minus 250 favourite on Parker Porter, which gives him an implied probability of 71%. And if we take a look at the odds on his opponent, Alan Baudot, he is currently around about a 3.0 plus 200 underdog, which is an implied probability of 33%. So Alan Baudot and Parker Porter are primarily strikers. What I would say about this fight, though, even though they're primarily strikers, Parker Porter is a lot more well-rounded. Alan Baudot, pure Muay Thai guy with a kickboxing background. Porter is much more likely to mix things up and potentially look to take this fight to the ground, which does make this an interesting matchup. But if we start off by taking a look at the tail of the tape, we'll see how they match up in terms of their size. Alan Baudot's 34 years old, 6'3" with a 79-inch reach, and Parker Porter's 36 years old, 6 foot tall with a 75-inch reach. So Baudot, a little bit taller, has a nice 4-inch reach advantage over Parker Porter. But I don't think that's going to play too much of a factor in this matchup for the way that these guys talk about stylistically when it comes to striking. We'll go into that in a moment. First of all, I want to talk about how these two guys match up when it comes to grappling. Because Alan Baudot does train at the MMA Factory in Paris alongside Cyril Gane. And we can see him we can see him cornering Cyril Gane here. There he is in Cyril Gane's corner. So Baudot, Cyril Gane's training partner, trains at MMA Factory in Paris. And what's very interesting about this is that fighters that come out of the MMA Factory gym just have a long history of having really bad takedown defense and being very low level on the ground. If we think about some of the MMA Factory fighters that have made it into the UFC, the first of course was Veronica Macedo. Her takedown defense was very bad and she was a low level on the ground. We then had Francis Ngannou, who initially was very, very bad on the ground. We saw that in his first fight against Stipe. Interestingly, he's left MMA Factory to go to the United States and improve that grappling now. But while he was training at MMA Factory, Francis Ngannou was very low level on the ground. And of course, Cyril Gane kind of got exposed in the Francis Ngannou fight late on when Francis was able to basically take him down and dominate him on the ground. So, Macedo and Gane, these are fighters that have come out of that gym. And they've kind of given us a glimpse into the fact that guys that come out of this gym, like even Nasruddin Imavov that trains at MMA Factory, like his takedown defense is very bad as well, and he's super weak off his back. So that's another guy. That's 4 guys that have come out of MMA Factory now with bad takedown defense and a low level ground game. And Baudot is really no different. Very bad takedown defense, very, very weak off his back. And even though Parker Porter rarely tries to take guys down, he did show a willingness to take his opponent down in his last fight against Chase Sherman, where he shot a really nicely timed deep double leg on Sherman, put him on his back, and looked very, very heavy from top position, very, very aggressive from top position. And it's important to remember this because I do think Baudot can have a little bit of success in this fight standing, but if any point in this fight Parker Porter were to get into trouble, he should just be able to take Baudot down and dominate him on the ground, which makes it very difficult to bet Baudot in this fight. But they are primarily strikers. Both guys are primarily strikers, so I would imagine a good amount of striking in this fight. And while they both have very different styles of striking, Baudot is very long, very tall, very lean, has a very, very heavily influenced Muay Thai style, and Parker Porter is much more of a pure boxing style. Even though I would say Baudot is the more technical striker out of the two, Parker Porter's style of striking poses a big problem to Alan Baudot, because Parker Porter has a great gas tank for a heavyweight. Despite his appearance, this guy can fight at a high pace for 3 rounds, no problem. He also throws a very high volume of strikes, and he's a high pressure fighter. He's also got a really good chin. I know he got knocked out in his debut against Chris Daukaus, but aside from that, this guy can take a shot. He's absolutely tough as nails. The weakness we've seen from Baudot in his past fights is that he's very good at being the hammer, but he's not so good at being the nail. And what I mean by that is, when Baudot is the aggressor, he's allowed to dictate the pace of the fight. He's allowed to choose when they exchange and control the distance. When Baudot is in control of everything, he looks very, very good. He's very technical, he moves well, he's fast, he's accurate. There's a lot to like about Baudot. But as soon as you start to pressure this guy and force him to react to what you're doing, you can, everything completely goes out the window. He's a lot worse defensively. He starts to fade very, very quickly, and he just doesn't react well to pressure at all. So that's a huge issue, because Parker Porter's not afraid to eat a shot to get inside and land one. He's a high pressure fighter, throws a really high volume of strikes, and I don't think Baudot is going to be able to back him up. So this is a really good stylistic matchup for Porter, because on the feet, he should be able to walk Baudot down, pressure him, crowd him, and outbox him, because we know Baudot is going to fade and his defense is going to go out the window very quickly if you pressure him. And if Baudot does react well to the pressure and starts to have a little bit of success on the feet, Porter can easily win this fight by going to his grappling, taking Baudot down and dominating him on the ground. So from a betting point of view, it's a tricky fight again, just like the main event between Jamahal Hill and Johnny Walker, because this is a very good fight for Parker Porter, and I would expect him to win a very high percentage of the time. But Baudot is a big guy, big, strong, athletic dude with power in his hands, and it's probably not smart to bet on a guy like Parker Porter in this odds range with an implied probability of 71%, when we know it only takes one shot to knock anyone out, right, especially in the heavyweight division. So it's tough for me to bet Parker Porter here, because as a big favourite, I just don't feel we're getting a very good risk to reward on our money at these odds. But I also don't want to bet on Alan Baudot, because even as a big underdog, Porter has the skills to absolutely dominate this fight, especially if he comes in with a grappling heavy game plan. So this one's a very, very easy pass for me. It's just one of those cards where I think the bookies, the way the odds are set, they're kind of pricing us out of betting on the guy that's more likely to win. Guys like Porter, guys like Jamahal Hill, very frustrating how their odds aren't a little bit better than they actually are. Okay, now let's take a look at the next fight, which is going to be Jim Miller versus Nicholas Motta. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on Motta, we can see that he is currently the favourite. Average odds of about 1.57, which is minus 175 for an implied probability of 64%. If we take a look at the odds on Jim Miller, he is around about a 2.50 underdog, which is plus 150 for an implied probability of 40%. So Jim Miller, 38 years old, 5'8" with a 71-inch reach, and Nicholas Motta, 29 years old, 5'9", with a 70-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same size, but obviously a massive difference in terms of their age, with Jim Miller being a grand total of 9 years older than Nicholas Motta, which gives Motta a huge advantage in this fight. We know that the younger fighter wins around 70% of the time. That's 7-0. The younger fighter wins around 70% of the time when there's a 9-year age gap in a fight. So straight away, that's just one of the reasons why we can start to understand Nicholas Motta being the favourite. The other X factor that we have to take into consideration on this one is that Jim Miller's got a lot of miles on the clock. He's had, close to 50 pro fights. On top of that, he's dealt with a lot of chronic injuries throughout his career that are still plaguing him to this day. Multiple broken hands, multiple broken bones, lots of head trauma. Jim Miller's been in absolute tons of wars in the UFC. The amount of time this guy has spent in the octagon, going the distance against some of the best fighters in the world. Tons and tons of damage, tons of head trauma, tons of wear and tear on his body. And as a result of all that, we are starting to see him, show signs of pretty significant decline over the last few years. On top of that, he battles with chronic Lyme disease as well, which he has to take a lot of medications for on a daily basis to kind of control it. And we know that medications come with side effects, so that's another thing that, is kind of going against Jim Miller. And with his age, Lyme disease, all the chronic injuries, his age, the number of fights he's had, Miller's going to be declining big time from fight to fight. And we've definitely seen evidence of his decline, like I say, over the last few years. Father Time is undefeated, and he's coming knocking for Jim Miller. So, Jim Miller's game as hell. He's tough as nails. He's got the heart of a lion. You won't find a guy tougher than Jim Miller. Definitely not easy for Nicholas Motta to make his UFC debut against a tough veteran like Jim Miller. But this is a young man's game, and Father Time is no longer on Jim Miller's side, unfortunately. So that's a big factor to consider in this one. Now, in terms of how these two guys match up from a stylistic point of view, it is a classic striker versus grappler matchup, with a bit of an asterisk next to it. We can safely say that Nicholas Motta is a striker, right? This guy's takedown offense isn't great. His ground game isn't great, but his striking is pretty nasty. Jim Miller's obviously a pretty well-rounded fighter. He's done a little bit of everything throughout his career. He's outstruck some of the best strikers in the history of the lightweight division, right? At one point, Jim Miller's boxing was very, very legit. However, at this stage in his career, I think it's going to be very difficult for him to kind of hang on the feet with these young, fast, explosive strikers like Nicholas Motta. And so at this stage in Miller's career, he's probably got to pull a little bit of a Glover Teixeira on us and start to use more of his grappling if he wants to compete against these guys. So Miller obviously does a bit of everything. He's very well rounded, but we know he's an ultra high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and so even though this isn't strictly a striker versus grappler matchup, I think we should approach it in that way, because I think if it does stay standing, Miller's going to find himself in a lot of trouble. So in terms of how these two guys match up when it comes to striking, Jim Miller's obviously tough as nails. He's a tricky southpaw. He's got nasty leg kicks and, you know, a nice left hook. The problem with Miller is, obviously, as you start to get older, your speed, your athleticism, your reflexes are the first things to go. And that's basically the attributes that make Motta so scary. Like, he's so fast, he's so accurate, he's so technical, and he hits really hard. This guy has vicious striking. Everything that he throws is to try and kill you, and he loads up and sits down so hard on every punch that he throws. He's got big power. He's a very dangerous striker. He moves very well. But what makes this guy so dangerous is that fighters that load up a lot on all their power punches and try and take you out and knock you out with every single thing that they throw, they often slow down as fights progress. But Motta's gas tank looks really good, which is very strange. He shouldn't be able to do that. But Nicholas Motta is one of these guys who's very dangerous for 15 minutes, and he can knock you out with anything that he throws. Which is obviously a problem for Jim Miller, because he's had almost 50 pro fights. He's taken a ton of head trauma. He's now 38 years old. He's not the best defensively anymore, and he does tend to slow down as fights wear on. And when he slows down, he becomes worse defensively, as he doesn't have the energy to defend himself properly. And so, as the fight wears on, if Motta can just make it out of round 1 here, I do think Miller's going to be a sitting duck to the knockout in round 2. Now, having said that, Jim Miller is not the kind of guy to just roll over and play dead. He will go out on his shield, he will stand his ground, and he will fire back in the face of a young, hungry bull like Motta coming forward to take him out. And this will be a big step up in competition for Motta. Miller will be by far the toughest, nastiest, scariest guy that Motta's ever faced. And Miller will bite down on his mouthpiece, stand his ground, fire back with that left hook all day long to try and catch Motta with a counter and take him out. So Motta's very aggressive. He looks to knock everyone out that he fights, and you know what they say, when you put yourself in a position to knock out your opponent, you also put yourself in a position to be knocked out. So if these guys get into a firefight, start playing rock'em sock'em robots on the feet, Miller could definitely catch him with something. It's far more likely that Motta will land a kill shot because of how much faster, how much more technical he is, and he's younger, fresher, could probably take a shot better at this stage in their career as well. In terms of grappling though, this one does get quite a bit more interesting, because Motta's takedown offense is really bad and his ground game looks pretty bad as well. We know that Jim Miller is a good offensive wrestler and an ultra high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and if this fight goes to the ground, Nicholas Motta is going to be in a world of trouble. There are levels to this game, and in terms of grappling, Miller is levels and levels and levels and levels above Motta on the ground. So Motta needs to treat the ground like lava. Definitely doesn't want to go to the ground with Miller. But where this fight gets complicated is, even though I think Jim Miller can take Motta down and cause him big problem on the ground, at this stage in Miller's career, a problem he's got is that the more he grapples, the more tired he gets. So if Miller starts to grapple, he burns himself out very quickly. And remember, we said Motta is a strong, physically imposing guy with a great gas tank. So Miller's in an awkward position where he can't really grapple hard for 3 rounds. So he's got to be very strategic and smart about when he uses his grappling. His best option is to use his grappling early in the fight, because if he waits until the 2nd and 3rd round, he might be too tired to get Motta down, or Motta might have knocked him out before he even gets a chance to use his grappling. So Miller's kind of got to use his grappling in round 1 here. But if he takes Motta down in round 1 and doesn't submit him, if Motta can just survive into the 2nd and 3rd round, because Miller's only got probably a good 2 or 3 minutes of grappling in him before he's completely gassed out of his mind, Miller's only got a very small window of time to get the job done. He needs to finish Motta on the ground in order to win this fight. And while he is a very dangerous submission artist, he's kind of putting all his eggs in, or he's going to kind of have to put all his eggs in one basket. If he doesn't use grappling in this fight and looks to pace himself over 3 rounds, he's probably going to get knocked out late on when he gets tired. And if he does use grappling and he doesn't get the finish, he's probably going to tire himself out and again get knocked out later on in the fight. So it's a tricky position for Miller, and it really comes down to whether or not he gets Motta down and whether or not Motta can survive on the ground. From a betting point of view, this fight is a tricky one, because even though Nicholas Motta is more likely to win, at odds of 1.57 minus 175 for an implied probability of 64%, I don't think you're getting like great odds on Motta here, because we already know Jim Miller is going to be the toughest, nastiest, best fighter he's ever fought. And even at this stage in Miller's career, like I say, he's still the kind of guy that's going to go out on his shield. He won't shy away from a firefight. And Motta is very aggressive, is very reckless. So he could get caught by Miller on the feet. But we also know that Motta has bad takedown offense, low level ground game, and Miller's ultra high level on the ground. So even though Motta is younger, fresher, nastier on the feet, faster, more accurate, more powerful, and we know Miller's got a bad gas tank as well, Motta should be the favourite. But if you're going to bet him this weekend at these odds, you're taking on a lot of risk, because there are a lot of ways that Miller can upset him. On the flip side, you don't really want to bet Miller either, because at odds of 2.50 plus 150 for an implied probability of 40%, we know that he's going to gas out and become very tired as the fight wears on. We know that Motta is younger, fresher, nastier, more powerful, can knock him out, will likely have an advantage on the feet. Do you really want to be betting on a 38-year-old guy with almost 50 pro fights, chronic injuries, chronic Lyme disease, bad gas tank? It's an absolute murder, right? So again, this is another one of those fights that's very difficult to bet, and the odds are probably exactly where they should be. It's tricky. It is very tricky. I don't see a strong position on either side in that matchup. So now let's talk about the final fight in this video that we're going to be discussing, and that's going to be Abdulrazak Alhassan against Joaquin Buckley. Remember, if you like these breakdown videos and you want to watch more of them for all the prelim fighters on this, or prelim fights on this card, check out my website, MMABettingTips.com. Link in the description below. Check it out. You're going to love it. VIP chat room on there. Talk to me, talk to my members, and a whole bunch of bets on there as well for pretty much every single UFC event we cover. So I'm just going to take a drink. These videos are exhausting. Okay. Alright. Joaquin Buckley against Abdulrazak Alhassan. Okay, so if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Abdulrazak Alhassan is the underdog at average odds of about 2.25, which is plus 125 for an implied probability of 44%. If we take a look at the odds on Buckley, he's currently around an average of 1.67, which is minus 149 for an implied probability of 60%. So Abdulrazak Alhassan is 36 years old, 5'10", with a 73-inch reach, and Buckley is 27 years old, 5'10", with a 76-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same size, but Buckley will have a 3-inch reach advantage over Alhassan. Even though they're both roughly the same size, there is a big age gap. Alhassan 36, Buckley 27, which means there's a 9-year age gap in a fight. And like we've just spoken about with the Miller versus Motta fight, the younger fighter wins around 70% of the time. That's 7-0 when there's a 9-year age gap in a fight. So already, based on that statistic, you know, the odds should favour Buckley and he should be the favourite. But there's a lot more to, you know, MMA than, you know, a fighter's age. If all we had to do is bet on the younger fighter, every time a younger fighter faced an older fighter in order to make money, we'd all be very, very wealthy. That information is easily available. We know it's a lot more complicated than that, and we need to consider how these two guys match up from a stylistic perspective before we can decide on, you know, whether it's worth betting this fight. So this is an interesting matchup because both of them are similar in many ways in that they're both very aggressive. They're both very dangerous. They come out the gate very aggressive and look to kill their opponents dead with vicious knockout power and big combinations with their boxing. But there is a big difference in the minutiae of the technique they use. They're very different kinds of boxers, but they do kind of have similar styles of fighting. So if we start off by discussing grappling, that's probably the easiest thing to tick off the list, and then we can cover how these two guys match up when it comes to striking, because I do think it's very, very likely to be a stand-up fight. So in terms of grappling, on paper, Abdulrazak Alhassan is the better grappler. His nickname is Judo Thunder. I think he's like a high-level judo black belt or something. I think he almost competed at the Olympics in judo. But I would recommend that if you're going to bet on MMA, don't make betting decisions based on what Wikipedia tells you or how many certificates for grappling a guy's got on his wall or how many grappling trophies he's got in his mum's house. Instead, focus on the skills you see in the octagon. And based on the skills we've seen in the octagon of Alhassan's grappling, he's a very low-level grappler. His takedown offense is very bad, and he's also very, very weak off his back. Joaquin Buckley doesn't have the grappling credentials on paper that Alhassan does. Certainly doesn't have a nickname like Judo Thunder. But I would give Buckley the advantage when it comes to grappling because he's younger. He's more... I'm not going to say he's more athletic and powerful than Alhassan because Alhassan is crazy powerful, crazy athletic. But the difference between Alhassan and Buckley is they're both crazy powerful and athletic, but Buckley is more powerful and athletic for longer in terms of Alhassan tends to wear down extremely quickly, whereas Buckley's gas tank is great. So from a technical point of view, Alhassan may be the better grappler, but because he can only grapple effectively for a short period of time, you've got to give Buckley the advantage when it comes to grappling because he can out-hustle and outwork Alhassan for the full 15-minute fight on the ground and in the clinch and in grappling positions, whereas Alhassan's gas tank limits how long he can grapple effectively for. So that's why I give Buckley the advantage when it comes to grappling. Now, because of Alhassan's bad gas tank, he never tries to take fighters down. And Buckley, even though he doesn't very often try to take fighters down, when he does, he doesn't really fully commit to it. In terms of when he shoots takedowns, it's kind of half-assed. He's not really going for it. It's maybe to just mix things up a little bit and get his opponents to, think about something different. Or it's maybe to take a little bit of a break if, there's crazy exchanges and the fight is a little bit wild. He'll maybe tie his opponent up, put him in the clinch just to kind of settle things down, take the sting out of the fight a little bit, like we saw Derek Lewis and Tai Tuivasa do for a moment in the first round on the weekend until Dan Miragliotta separated them. So Buckley in his past fight take his opponents down that much. What I will say though is in his last fight against Antonio Araujo, he did commit a little bit harder to his grappling, but still didn't fully commit to it, which is interesting because Araujo, just like Abdulrazak Alhassan, also has really bad takedown offense, and he's very, very weak off his back. So if Buckley were the kind of guy that would start to evolve into using more grappling in his fights, I think there's a good chance we would have seen it against Araujo. Although what I can say is Alhassan is a lot scarier than Araujo. So if Buckley wants to fight smart here, if I were him, if I were his coaches, I would recommend that he does come into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, because you do not want to be standing in front of a guy like Alhassan. He's extremely dangerous. And if you do grapple with Alhassan, even if you may not get him down, just by forcing him to defend takedowns and working with takedowns in the clinch, you're going to wear this guy down and ultimately make his striking less effective. So we haven't seen tons of, grappling from Buckley in the past. But because Alhassan is so scary, I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot more grappling from Buckley this weekend. And earlier in the video, we did talk about the evolution in Johnny Walker's style of fighting, right? Where he was trying different styles and experimenting to find a style that work best for his skill set and his body type. And I do think we're seeing Joaquin Buckley go through a similar process at the moment where, in his first few fights in the UFC, he came out the gate very aggressive, looking to kill everyone in round 1. I mean, he was even very aggressive in that Kevin Holland fight. But then he got knocked out by Alessio Di Chirico. And then in his fight against Antonio Araujo, he fought a lot smarter, a lot safer, a lot more strategically, paced himself better, didn't get sucked into any reckless exchanges, and instead looked to just chip away at Araujo, rack up points, and win a safer decision than putting himself in as much danger as he has in his past fights, where he's kind of just come forward playing rock'em sock'em robots and trying to drag his opponents into these crazy exchanges. I know that Araujo did get knocked out late on, so Buckley didn't actually win a decision, but that fight was well on the way to go into a decision if you go back and watch it. So in terms of how these two guys match up from a stylistic point of view when it comes to striking, Alhassan is by far the more technical striker. When you look at Alhassan, he's a very good boxer, very fast, very accurate, very tight, crisp, straight punches, and throws a really diverse range of attacks. He's got vicious leg kicks, vicious body kicks. He'll go to the jab. He'll split the boxing guard with a jab, and then, come with a big power hooks to look to kill you. Buckley is a lot greener, a lot reckless, a lot wilder when it comes to striking. He tends to lunge forward with these big, wide, looping, winging hooks. And so, straight punches and superior technique usually beat wide punches and like a reckless, wild technique. So I would give Alhassan the advantage on the feet. However, both these guys are so dangerous. Both of them have got such big knockout power that it only takes one shot and either of them can end the other's night at any time. What I would say about this fight is, again, like what I said with the grappling, even though Abdulrazak Alhassan is the more technical striker out of the two, by some considerable margin as well, the difference is Alhassan slows down a lot as fights wear on, whereas Buckley has a great gas tank and he can fight at a high pace for 3 rounds. So while Alhassan is more technical, he's a much better boxer than Buckley. As the fight wears on, you've got to favour Buckley because he can fight closer to his full potential for longer than Alhassan has. But Buckley needs to be careful in this one because he did fight at a very slow pace against Araujo. And if he fights at that slow pace against Alhassan may be able to pace himself over 3 rounds and then use his superior technique to kind of outstrike Joaquin Buckley. So Buckley's in a difficult position where if he works as hard as he usually does and gets as aggressive as he usually does, he risks getting knocked out by Alhassan because you definitely don't want to be getting into exchanges with this guy. But then if Buckley kind of fights a little bit safer and smarter like he did against Araujo, Alhassan may be able to pace himself better and just outclass Buckley with superior technique. So it's a very interesting fight. I definitely lean towards Buckley. You kind of got to lean towards him with his superior gas tank, his age, the fact that, like I say, he can out-hustle Alhassan on the feet and on the ground if he fights at a high pace because of how much Alhassan slows down. But Alhassan is very, very, very dangerous on the feet, and Buckley isn't as technical and he isn't as good defensively. So it's an interesting fight. Definitely lean towards Buckley, but not with a huge amount of confidence. Alhassan's very, very dangerous, even at this stage in his career, 36 years old. So I hope you found that breakdown video useful. I hope you found this video useful, and hopefully you can use the information in this video to make better betting decisions, maybe even make some extra cash this weekend. Don't forget to check out my website, MMABettingTips.com. Like this video if you want me to keep doing these videos and you like them, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, and I hope you make loads of money this weekend. Take care, everyone. Bye.